We are mere weeks away from the greatest weather of the year, and what we do right now, in August, decides everything. It decides whether our gardens keep producing beautifully all the way through fall and into winter, or whether we lose the battle to seasonal depression. Yeah, I said it, seasonal depression. Because when the garden goes empty and the brown takes over, the mind follows. So if you have been dragging yourself through July, sweating through shirts, watching tomatoes split and squash wilt, listen up. August is not the finish line. August is the starting pistol for the best gardening season of the entire year. And if you plant the right 5 crops in the next few weeks, you will be eating out of your garden while your neighbors are staring at bare dirt and paying $8 a clamshell for sad grocery store lettuce. And you are not a quitter. You didn't make it this far just to quit in August. So, let's get into it. I am going to walk you through 5 must-plant crops for August. 5 things you can put in the ground, on the patio, in raised beds, whatever you have, that will feed your family straight through fall and into winter. And I will give you a full seed variety list at the very end, plus affiliate links in the description, so you don't have to hunt around. Quick note on where I am, so you know my bias. I am gardening on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, just outside Wilmington. But honestly, it almost doesn't matter where I am, because nearly everything we are going to talk about today is frost-tolerant or freeze-tolerant, and it grows deep into fall and winter pretty much everywhere. I am going to split my advice in 2 directions for you: people whose first frost hits in October, and people whose first frost holds off until November or December. If you are in a frost-free zone, congratulations, this stuff is almost trivially easy for you, and you can replant it year-round. Alright, crop number 1. The big guns of fall gardening. The brassica transplants. I am talking bok choy, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, kale, kohlrabi, mustard greens, mizuna, romanesco. There is obviously a lot more than one crop in that list, but hey, gardening is a buffet. You pick what you want. Now, here is the critical thing about brassicas in August. You do not direct sow them. I repeat, do not direct sow them. Early August soil is still baking hot, and the bugs are still absolutely relentless. You will lose that battle. Instead, you start them indoors in midsummer so that when the heat finally breaks and pest pressure drops, you have these perfect little seedlings ready to transplant. That is the whole game. Beat the heat by hiding them inside, then put them out as soon as conditions turn friendly, and harvest them well before the hard freezes become routine. So, here is how I do it. Grab some seed trays, fill them with a good potting mix, and make sure the bag actually says indoor mix or seed starting mix on it. That matters. Now take a chopstick, the dinner table kind, and poke a little divot in each cell, about a 1/4 inch deep. Drop in 2 to 3 seeds per cell. Yes, 2 to 3. We call this process overseeding because seeds don't have 100% germination rates. If all of them come up, great. You can either thin them down to the strongest one later, or you can gently separate them and get a free bonus plant out of it. Lightly press the soil back over them with your finger so they have good seed-to-soil contact, then water them in with 2 or 3 gentle passes. You want gentle. If you blast them with a hard stream, the seeds will float to the surface and you'll have a tray of nothing. The timeline works out beautifully. Your seedlings will be ready to transplant in about 4 to 6 weeks from the day you sow them. So if you start in early August, you are transplanting out in early to mid-September. That timing lines up perfectly with the first real break in the summer heat in most places. Now, once they go outside, you have 3 options depending on your conditions. Option A: the weather is good and the bugs have backed off, Just plant them straight in the ground. Done. Option B. Build a small hoop house out of PVC pipe, which is a $15 project. Toss some insect netting over the frame, and that physically blocks insects, birds, and squirrels until the plants harden off and get big enough that the critters stop caring about them. Option C. If it is still blazing hot where you are, like it is here in North Carolina, you can throw shade cloth over the same hoops, or just drape it over the top of the bed until the sun intensity drops. I will link a separate video above and in the description that walks you through building the PVC hoop house. I use them basically year-round. They are quick, they are cheap, and the parts are basic. One more thing about brassicas before we move on. They are more freeze-hardy than they are frost-hardy, and that is a subtle but important distinction. A hard frost that forms directly on the leaves will damage them at much higher temperatures than a plant that is covered and protected will tolerate. So when frost or freeze is in the forecast, throw some hoops up and drape a 1.5-ounce agricultural fabric over the top. That prevents the frost from forming directly on the vegetation. I have had established brassicas under that kind of cover tolerate temperatures slightly below 10 degrees Fahrenheit and keep on going. Just remember, small transplants are not as cold-hardy as full-grown plants, so the goal is to get them out early enough to establish before the real cold sets in. And that is crop number 1. We are just getting warmed up. Stick around, because peas are next, and I promise you, the trick with peas is going to surprise you. All right, crop number 2. And this one is going to flip something you thought you knew about peas completely upside down. We are talking peas. Shelling peas, snap peas, snow peas, all of them. And unlike the brassicas we just planted, these guys get direct sown right into the garden. No transplanting, no fussing with seed trays indoors. You just poke a hole and drop them in. But here is where the timing matters more than almost anything else we are going to talk about today. If your first frost hits in October, you want to direct sow your peas at the very beginning of August. If your first frost is more like November or December, wait until the back half of August. Let me tell you exactly how I think about it here in North Carolina. My average first frost is around November 10th, so I am sowing my peas somewhere between August 15th and August 20th. Why that window? Because peas usually germinate in about 7 days, fully in about 2 weeks. I do not want them breaking ground until about September 1st, when the heat is finally starting to drop, and I really, really do not want them maturing while it is still hot out. Peas that mature in summer heat get tough, fibrous, and sad. I want them maturing during those chilly but not frosty nights that October and early November bring. That is the sweet spot. Chilly nights, mild days, and suddenly the peas are sweet and tender and perfect. So here is the actual how-to. Stick your finger in the soil, make a hole about 1 inch deep. For bush or dwarf varieties, space those holes about 2 to 3 inches apart. For the vining or climbing types, give them more room, 4 to 6 inches apart. Drop in 1 to 2 pea seeds per hole. Backfill, and here is the part most people get wrong. Amend the soil very lightly with an all-purpose organic fertilizer. I mean very lightly. Peas are nitrogen-fixing legumes, which is a fancy way of saying they actually pull nitrogen out of the air and store it in their roots. They make their own fertilizer. So if you pile on the nitrogen, you are going to get a massive wall of leaves and almost no pods. Light hand, just a whisper of fertilizer. Then water them in and keep the soil consistently moist until germination. Don't let it dry out. Don't let it turn into a swamp either, just moist. Now, 2 things will make or break your pea harvest, and they are both about timing and protection. The first one is a fact that surprises almost everyone I tell it to. The pea plant itself is frost and freeze hardy. The plants can take cold, but the pods cannot. Frost forming directly on the pods, or a freeze that goes right through them, can absolutely fracture the pods and ruin the fruit inside. So if a frost or freeze is coming, even if the timing is slightly off on your planting, you can save the whole crop by throwing a frost blanket or some agricultural fabric over the top of them. That single move, covering up before a cold night, can be the difference between a beautiful harvest and a heartbreaking one. The second thing is the pest problem at germination. Birds and squirrels love baby pea shoots. They will walk right down a row and pluck them out of the ground one by one, like little green candies. So, from the day you sow until the plants are at least 6 inches tall, ideally a bit more, keep some insect netting over the bed. It does not need to be fancy, just enough to physically stop the critters from getting in. Once the plants are big and tough, the birds and squirrels leave them alone. They want the tender stuff, not the woody stems. Okay, real talk for a second. If you have been enjoying this video so far, would you please consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the like button, and leaving a comment down in the comment section. I know, every creator says this, but I'm going to tell you exactly why it matters more this year than it has in the past. YouTube changed their algorithm this year to promote shorts a lot more. So it has been really hard for us long-format content creators to find new audiences. It has also been hard competing with all of this AI slop out there, and I am a real human being working human hours here. Every like, every subscribe, every comment helps the algorithm show this video to more people who actually want to grow food. So if this is helping you, help me out for about 10 seconds. I would really appreciate it. Alright, that's the channel stuff. Back to peas. The whole secret with peas in August is really just 3 things. Sow them at the right time for your frost date. Cover them up when frost threatens the pods. And protect the babies from birds and squirrels until they get big enough to defend themselves. That is it. Do those 3 things, and you will be eating peas in October while everyone else is wondering what to do with their empty beds. Coming up next, we have got a crop that I think is wildly underrated as a fall vegetable. Romaine lettuce. And I am going to tell you why fall is not just a good time to grow it, it is actually the best time. Stick with me. Crop number 3. And this is the one I get the most pushback on, because most people think of romaine lettuce as a spring thing. You grow it early, you harvest it before the heat hits. Done. That is the story we all grew up with, and I am here to tell you that story is wrong, or at least it is missing the better half. Fall is when romaine absolutely shines. This is my favorite time of year to grow romaine lettuce because it is a vastly better fall crop than it is a spring crop. Romaine does not really like it when temperatures flare up big time in the summer. It sulks, it bolts, it turns bitter and tough. But it actually really likes the cool temperature decay that happens in fall, when the nights get crisp and the days get shorter, and the whole garden finally exhales. And that brings me to the flavor point, because this is the one that converts people. If you have ever had romaine lettuce that tastes a little bit bitter, that is because it is maturing when it is way too hot out. The plant is stressed, the leaves are producing defensive compounds, it tastes like punishment. But romaine that matures in cool fall weather, it is sweet, it is crisp, it is nutty. It is the same plant, the same variety, but grown in the right conditions, and it is a completely different vegetable. Once you taste fall-grown romaine, you will never look at spring romaine the same way again. And the longevity is incredible. Fall-maturing romaine will stand in the garden for a long time. As long as you keep hard frost and hard freezes off the plants, They just sit there, holding in the garden, waiting for you to come pick a leaf or two for dinner. It is like a slow-release salad bar that lasts for weeks. Now, the frost vulnerability piece is important, and it is where a lot of people get tripped up. Many lettuces are frost and freeze tolerant. Romaine is not, in quite the same way. Even a light frost, if it is too prolonged, can damage the edges of the heads of lettuce, and a hard frost and freeze can absolutely decimate your crop. So the protection rule is the same as the brassicas. When frost or freeze is in the forecast, you cover. Agricultural fabric, frost blanket, row cover, whatever you want to call it. That cover prevents frost from forming directly on the heads, and that is the whole game. To give you a real number to anchor to, I have had fall romaine under cover take temperatures down to about 22 degrees Fahrenheit with no damage. At least, that is what has happened here in my garden. I am not promising 22 in your microclimate, because every garden is different. But that gives you an idea of what is possible when you simply throw a cover over the top. The cover is doing almost all the work. Without it, you are gambling. With it, you are not. Timing-wise, the play is to start your seeds indoors while it is still too hot outside. Same idea as the brassicas. 4 to 6 weeks from sow date to transplant ready. So if you start them in early August, they are ready to go out in early to mid-September, right as the worst of the summer heat is breaking. Plant them out when it is warm but no longer broiling. Let them establish, and then let the cool fall nights push them into that sweet, sweet flavor zone. Harvest window opens up and stays open, and if an early frost comes, you keep them under row cover, and they will stand another 4 to 6 weeks with protection. So one planting can easily feed you from late September all the way into December in many zones. Here is the actual seed starting method. Grab a chopstick, make a 1/4-inch divot in each cell of your seed tray. Sow 3 to 4 seeds per cell. Yes, 3 to 4. Lettuce seeds aren't the greatest when it comes to reliable germination. They have what I call spotty germination. Some come up strong, some don't come up at all. Some show up a week late just to keep things interesting. So overseed. Lightly compact the soil over them with your finger, and water in with 2 or 3 gentle passes. You do not want a hard stream. Lettuce seeds are tiny, and they will absolutely float to the surface if you blast them. Germination is pretty quick. You will usually see the first ones popping in about 5 to 7 days, with the full cell filling out in around 2 weeks. Then, you are ready to transplant. Now, when you put them out, the same 3 options logic from the brassicas applies. If your late summer or early fall is unusually warm, start them under shade cloth. You can drape it right over the top of the bed, or you can throw it over PVC hoops, same setup. If it is still buggy but not crazy hot, insect netting to block the bugs, the birds, and the squirrels until the plants get big and established and no longer look like a salad to every critter in the neighborhood. And if an early frost or freeze is rolling in, swap the netting for agricultural fabric. Same hoops, different cover, totally different job. That is the beauty of building that hoop house frame once. You change the fabric based on the season and the problem you are solving. That is romaine. It is not a spring crop. It is a fall crop. Plant it in August, protect it through the first frosts, and you will be eating the sweetest lettuce of your entire gardening year. And honestly, after the bitter bolted mess of summer lettuce, it will feel like a miracle. Coming up next, we are getting into the speed demons of the garden, cucumbers and zucchini. And I am going to show you why the last wave of summer is secretly the easiest, most pest-free wave of the entire season. You are going to want to stick around for this one. Crop number 4. And this is the one that makes people stop and say, "Wait, are you serious?" We are talking cucumbers and zucchini. Yes, both of them, in the same slot, because they behave almost identically, and they are about to become your new favorite late summer trick. Now is the perfect time to sow your last wave of cucumbers and zucchini for the season. And if you think this cannot be done, I am here to tell you, you are probably wrong. Let me explain why. Cucumbers and zucchini are two of the fastest growing warm weather crops you can possibly put in the ground. They germinate in as little as 3 to 4 days. 3 to 4 days. You go to bed, you wake up, and there are little green hooks pushing out of the soil. First fruits can show up in as little as 40 days after germination. Do that math. Seed in the ground today, and you could be harvesting in as little as 5 to 6 weeks. Seed on August 1st, and you are looking at food as early as September 7th to September 15th, depending on the variety. That is not next season, that is next month. And I am not just saying this, I am showing you, right here, in my own garden. Look at these cucumber vines. They have only been out in my garden for about 3 weeks. Look at them. They are already 3 to 4 feet long, sprawling everywhere, and there are baby cucumbers forming all over the place. I have already harvested 2 cucumbers off these vines, and there are plenty more where those came from. That is right, 3-week-old vines, fruit on the vine, harvest happening. Right next to them, my original spring planting of cucumbers is completely dead. Done. Finished. Brown sticks. The new transplants are already outperforming them. Same story with the zucchini. I have got a survivor from spring that is about to get ripped out. It is on its last legs, and right next to it I have got 2 younger plants. One is about 3 weeks old, the other is about 2 weeks old. The 3-week-old plant is already starting to produce. I am even seeing male flowers on it. They just grow like weeds. They absolutely fly. Now, the soil is warm right now, which means you can direct sow with 0 fuss. No indoor seed starting, no transplanting shock, no hardening off. Just stick your finger in the dirt, make a 1-inch hole, drop in 1 to 2 seeds. You can overseed if you want, same logic as everything else, because germination isn't 100%, and thin later if you get doubles. Backfill, water in, done. Let the warm August soil do its thing. Now let me talk about the wave strategy, because this depends on where you live. If your first frost is in October, you can still start 1 more wave right now. Don't wait. Get it in the ground this week. If your first frost is more like November or December, like it is here in North Carolina, you have time for 2 more waves. That is 2 plantings between now and your frost date. I personally sow new waves of cucumbers and zucchini every 4 to 6 weeks all season long. It is not a one-and-done crop for me. It is a continuous rotation. As one plant fades, the next one is already coming on strong. The garden never goes empty. But here is the real reason, the secret reason, why you absolutely have to do a late summer planting of these. The pests. If you have never grown a late summer planting of cucumbers and zucchini, you are about to just have your life changed. Because the plantings of cucumbers and zucchini we put out in our gardens in spring get harassed with all sorts of pests, squash bugs, vine borers, cucumber beetles. They are brutal. They show up in May and June, and they just chew through everything. By the back half of summer, though, the picture completely changes. Most locations have no vine borer generations left by late summer. Cucumber beetles are basically done. Squash bug pressure is dropping fast. The pest army that destroyed your spring planting has marched on, and your late summer plants, sown right around now, slip in completely underneath them. More harvest, less work, less spraying, less heartbreak. You will wonder why you didn't do this years ago. Variety-wise, here is the guidance. Choose cucumbers and zucchini with the fewest days to maturity possible. Many exist at 50 days to maturity or less, and those early varieties are absolutely the play for this time of year. The shorter the window, the more food you get before frost. But if all you have is leftover seed from spring, do not let that stop you. Give it a try anyway. You will still get a harvest. A 55-day variety in August is still going to give you buckets of zucchini before your first frost. So, that is the 4-crop rundown so far. Brassicas indoors, peas direct sown, romaine indoors, and now a fresh wave of cucumbers and zucchini direct sown into warm soil to escape the worst of the pest pressure. 4 crops, 4 different strategies, all designed to fill your garden from September straight through the end of the year. Coming up in the final part, we are going to talk about crop number 5, and it is actually 2 crops in one depending on what zone you live in. Plus, I am going to show you the seed variety list I promised at the start, give you the link setup, and tell you a little bit about why this whole gardening thing matters to me on a level that goes way deeper than vegetables. Stick around. We are almost there. Alright, we are at crop number 5, and this is the one where I am going to split it based on where you live, because the right answer is different depending on your zone. I am going to give you onions for zone 7 or warmer, and carrots and beets for zone 6 and colder. Pick the one that applies to you and run with it. Let me start with onions, and I want to be very clear about what I mean, because there are 2 totally different things people call onions. There are bunching onions, the ones you grow mostly for the green tops, the spring onions you see at the farmer's market. Those can be grown in basically any climate, 365 days a year. They are heat tolerant, they are ultra cold hardy, they are basically indestructible. We are not talking about those today. Today, I am talking about bulbing onions, the big ones. The ones that form a real bulb underground and cure into the storage onions you keep on the counter all winter. Bulbing onions are less cold hardy than the bunching type, so they really are a zone 7 and warmer play. But let me tell you what happened in my own garden to prove what is possible. I am in zone 8, southeastern North Carolina. Last winter, we got all the way down to 9.8 degrees Fahrenheit at my garden, and we got absolutely hammered by ice and snow. Real winter weather. Underneath a row cover for protection, none of my bulbing onions took any damage. Not a single one. And that same protected planting gave me the biggest, earliest onion harvest that I have ever had, picked from late May into early June. So if I can keep bulbing onions alive at 9.8 with ice and snow falling on top of them, just with a simple row cover, you can do this in zone 7, 8, 9, 10, no problem. The plan is straightforward. Start your bulbing onion seed indoors right now, in August. Transplant them out in late September to early October, so they have time to grow, harden off, and get established before the real cold arrives. Run a row cover over them through the entire winter. That is the system. Start indoors, transplant out, cover up, let them ride out the cold, harvest in late spring. Beautiful. The onion seed starting method is a little different from the brassicas and the lettuce. Onion seeds are tiny, so you do not poke individual holes. You just lightly sprinkle the seeds across the top of a pot filled with potting mix, and then you cover them with about a 1/4 inch more mix on top. Germination is a bit slower than the other crops, and they will be ready to transplant in about 8 to 10 weeks. I personally like to start mine in big pots rather than little seed trays, because onion seedlings actually tolerate being pulled apart and separated at transplant time, so you can crowd them in and then tease them apart when you plant them out. No fuss. Now, if you are in Zone 6 or colder, your crop 5 is carrots and beets. Two classic cold hardy root vegetables. And the reason I am putting them in this cold zone slot is a piece of flavor chemistry that I think is really cool. Carrots and beets produce sugars inversely proportional to temperature. Translation: the colder it is when they reach maturity, the more sugars they will have, and the warmer it is outside, the starchier and lower in sugar content they will be. So a carrot that matures in warm fall weather is going to taste woody and bland. A carrot that matures in actual cold weather, like proper cold, the kind that makes you reach for a jacket, that same carrot is going to taste like candy. Same variety, completely different experience, all driven by temperature. I am not yet recommending carrots and beets for warmer or milder zones, because they may mature while it is still warm, and they will not be as sweet. But you can absolutely start them in any zone. Just know that cold temperatures are what drive that sugar development. So if you are in a mild zone, time them as late as you possibly can. If you are in a cold zone, you have hit the jackpot. The sowing rule for both of these is non-negotiable. Direct sow only. Beets and carrots are both root crops and should never be started as transplants, because if you try and transplant them, generally they will die. But if they do take, a lot of times they will be deformed and kinked. You will end up with forked, ugly roots that look like they belong in a horror movie. Just direct sow them. No exceptions. Beet method is simple. 1/2 inch deep, space them 3 to 4 inches apart. That spacing gives each beet room to bulb up without bumping into its neighbor. Carrot method. Long trenches, 1/4 inch deep, and overseed generously, because carrot germination rates are really poor. Carrots are the worst germinators in the whole garden, honestly. So put down a lot more seed than you think you need, then thin later if you end up with a crowded row. Keep the soil consistently moist through germination. Germination is about 7 days for the first ones, with the full stand coming up in around 2 weeks. Then you are off to the races. So that is all 5 crops: brassicas, peas, romaine, cucumbers, and zucchini, and onions or carrots and beets, depending on your zone. 5 things to plant in August that will keep your garden producing straight through fall and into winter. And now I want to talk to you for a second because I have been promising this the whole video, and I want to land it. I am fairly convinced that if you do not plant at least some of these, you will regret it later. I know August is tough. I know you are tired. The rain, the humidity, the thunderstorms rolling through every afternoon, the heat that just will not quit. I get it. There are days I look out at my own garden and think, I am done. I cannot do this anymore. But here is what I know. In about 4 to 5 weeks, the weather is going to turn. The storms will slow down. The humidity will drop. The mornings will get cool. And we are going to get those blue skies, those beautiful low humidity blue skies that make you want to stand outside and just breathe. That is coming. And if you do not have anything planted when it arrives, you are going to wish you did. You are going to walk out to bare dirt and feel that little pang of regret. I am not being dramatic when I say gardening cured mine. That was the missing piece of the puzzle for me, because I had terrible seasonal affective disorder. Now, it is virtually gone. I am not saying gardening is going to cure yours. I am not a doctor. But it definitely cannot hurt. And honestly, having something alive and green to tend to in November and December, when everything else out there is brown and dead, that does something to a person. It really does. I know what some of you are thinking. It is too cold where I live. It is too hot where I live. It is too buggy. The soil is bad. I do not have enough space. Listen.